Welcome to the No Windy Sleeves podcast, where we discuss personal development topics ranging from health and fitness to business and entrepreneurship. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh, and always remember to fuel your body and fill your sleeves.
Whoa, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. Another episode of the No Windy Sleeves podcast. Special guest today, someone who taking the time to hop on with us. Very good relationship with my brother, but also where it hits home with me, former baseball player, collegiately, professionally, and kind of use that to scale into his professional life. So we have Cody Evans. Thank you so much for joining us, man. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So as I mentioned just briefly in the intro, we have a lot in common when it comes to, playing baseball for the majority of our lives. And I know that's something that we want to dive into, but I think to kind of set the table for that, just if you could, give everyone an introduction of yourself, brief background, where you went to school, where you're from, where you played ball, and kind of, just kind of leading us up to where we're at now.
Yeah, sure thing. Long story, but all right, played baseball my whole life, little league through high school. I was what they call a late bloomer. So I wasn't really the star athlete in high school. I contributed. We won a CIF championship, so I got a ring, but can't say I had a major contributing part in that. So I actually went to a junior college, Golden West Junior College in Huntington Beach, and redshirted my first year even.
You're
had
from
a lot of hype.
California?
Really tall. Yeah, in California, Orange County. So I got a ton of height. I'm 6'5" now, so I was about 6'3" when I graduated high school, but I was only like 170 pounds or so. So went there, started working out a little bit more, started putting on weight, was drinking protein shakes and peanut butter jelly sandwiches, 5 and 6 times a day trying to gain weight. So I actually spent 3 years there before I really started hitting my stride and developing a little bit and throwing harder. Broke 90 miles an hour in junior college. That's kind of like a major signaling event where scouts suddenly are interested in you, right? And then each state took a notice. So that's my 4-year Division I, transferred over to Long Beach State. Played there in 2005. Had a killer team. My shortstop was Troy Tulowitzki. Third baseman was Evan Longoria.
Damn.
God, we had about 7 or 8 guys that got an opportunity to go play pro ball off that team.
Those are some big names too.
Yeah. They, went on, did awesome things. And then, I was actually the failure from the starting pitching staff because it was Jared Hughes, Marco Estrada, and Cesar Ramos were our other 3. All 3 got some big league time, and I hit my ceiling in AAA. I never got the cup of coffee.
So you made it all the way to AAA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's coming from anyone, obviously, that doesn't know too much about minor league or baseball. I mean, AAA, getting to that point, I would love to see the percentage breakdown because a lot of guys will go in and you got, rookie ball and then single, double A. Sometimes it can take a long time to get all the way up and get into the bigs, but AAA, that's a tough place to get to. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's because a lot of guys go straight to the bigs out of double A. Double A is, if you're on a fast track and you're doing well, and there's a spot open in the big leagues, you'll go straight out of double A. Triple A is like this holding tank. A lot of long-time career guys with big league time in triple A, and they're the backup player for whatever position. I always tell people think about the Yankees shortstop in triple A when Jeter was doing his thing.
Yeah,
guy was probably a stud, right? But
so they kind of sit there ready to fill in for an injury and then go back down, and they kind of the guys that kind of bounce back and forth a lot, like you said, kind of career guys.
Exactly. A lot of movement in AAA and, trades and bartering and stuff like that. So it's an interesting level.
How was that? So when you graduated, drafted or undrafted?
Yeah, so drafted in 2005 by the Arizona Diamondbacks.
How was that experience? I feel like that's always someone's dream, getting that phone call.
Oh, it was awesome, man. Yeah, it was especially my story, never being the star, athlete and things like that, and all those people that wondered why I was riding the bench in high school, and
those are the
it's
best,
kind of like that nod and that affirmation for all the time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears put into it.
Did something just click for you when you were in college, or was there something that you can kind of pinpoint for yourself that accelerated your growth or untapped that potential that you had, or was it just kind of maturing into your body?
Yeah, it's kind of a culmination of a lot of things. I mean, I think being that I was never the most, gifted and kind of shoe-in star athlete, I had to work really hard to be that second and third line player,
Yep.
So yeah, I learned how to bust my ass and work really hard for what I get. And then when my body finally started kicking in, I started throwing harder. By Long Beach State, I was around the low 90s. I would scratch 94, maybe a few 95s, but I was usually about 90, 93. So I think all of that coming together, the work ethic, the body, the development, put me in that spot.
And how was that? I feel like you don't see that as much now, because so many kids are one sport athletes, or, I mean, people start to develop, they're starting to do baseball only at 9 years old. They're starting strength training at 9 years old. When you see them, progress, was there a lot of shock in the culture for you, where coaches like, where did this kid come from? Is it something that I did? Kind of what was the response to people when they kind of saw you jumping? Or like going back to your high school, and people are probably like, all right, we'll see him in a couple of years working here. And you're like, yeah, I just got drafted.
Yeah, it's I remember the coach that didn't play me all that much in high school, but definitely acknowledge. I mean, he knew the work ethic was there. He always saw that I was, one of those guys that showed up early, left late, put in the time. I would have liked to dig a little more and say, why didn't you give me that opportunity and let me, prove it and earn it? But yeah, I don't think people were necessarily like mind blown or shocked, because they kind of saw me just continuing to go year over year.
Yeah. How was the transition from college ball to the pros? I mean, not only just from a talent perspective, was it kind of, holy shit, this is real. Every pitch is a lot different, a lot more rides on it. Not even getting into the lifestyle piece of it.
Yeah. Baseball wise, I was a pitcher. I forgot to mention that through all this, but I guess throwing velocity would cover it. But
I know I should have mentioned that, because I knew it. I just assumed everyone else did. Are you green on your screen?
Oh, you know what? That's been happening on my camera. Hold on.
You're good. I mean, it's got the fast switch green, so I'm definitely down with that.
I usually take care of it. How'd that go?
Still green, but I ride with it. I like the green. That's the gym colors.
All right. So yeah, the experience with pitching in pro ball, it's kind of like college when you play, the non-top teams, the bottom teams, you get to the sixth hitter or so, and usually you can, power through the bottom of the lineup. But when you face the top D1 teams, it's a lot more thorough. And every step of pro ball is kind of an escalation of that, right? Where, as you go up in A ball, double A, triple A, suddenly those 8th and 9th hitters, they're not, an easy time anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of times they give you hell, right? Because they're just, those production guys that battle you until they get on first base.
They're the annoying ones. They're just fouling off, battling up in your pitch count. They're not the ones that's going to hit over the fence, but they're the ones that are the biggest thorn in your side.
Exactly. Every now and then you get one of those teams that's just built for power, and sometimes those 8 and 9 hole hitters will take you deep.
Yeah.
When you get those stacked teams. So yeah, that was kind of difference in the difficulty level. It's just the depth, the talent level going through a lineup.
What were you known for? Obviously velocity. I mean, maybe a few years ago too. I mean, that was definitely on the higher end. Now you're seeing guys, power pitchers sitting around 100. Were you a power guy, four seam heavy ball, or were you kind of more of a movement location type guy?
So I evolved throughout my career. I started off as a starter sinker ball pitcher. So, low 90s is hard, but again, once you get to that level, low 90s is what they see every single day. Right?
I will say this. I was a catcher. My least favorite games to catch were sinker ball throws, just because that two seam running on us from a right-hander is just taking that thumb, like, trying to get under it and just dragging it out. I remember just icing my wrist after every game with guys like that.
And I can't explain it. You usually get consistent movement. Every now and then one of them just takes off, and you get a few extra inches. Yeah, that'll bust up your catcher for sure. But yeah, I started out sinker ball, change up, because change up kind of dove the other way at different speeds. So I would just mix up, keep people off balance, try to get as many ground balls as possible. So I was a big keep the pitch count low, go deep in games. You know, 3 pitch inning was like the pinnacle, right? Just 3 ground balls and
weren't always going for swing and misses.
No, because swing and misses, the stats are actually really low in pro ball.
Yeah, it's bad. People don't get that. Strikeouts look cool, but that you can't go deep into games. Your pitch count, especially nowadays with the pitch counts, are keeping guys a lot lower. Is there someone who, you know, when you were throwing, you tried to emulate? This sounds a lot like, I know in that time period, like a Greg Maddux was someone that we all grew up watching.
Yeah, and the model there was actually with the Diamondbacks. It was Brandon Webb.
Yep.
So he was doing his thing and winning his Cy Youngs, and actually the Diamondbacks, you know, built their team around him. So at that time, their whole infield was a bunch of studs designed for that ground ball pitching, right?
I'm a Derek Lowe guy from the Red Sox around that time. Loved watching him throw.
Yeah. So I modeled myself after that. And then the evolution is kind of the middle of my career. It's actually interesting because, you know, I started at the front end as a starter. I moved into more of like a long relief swing role because they realized that I could come out of the pen and throw strikes and, you know, pick up for a starter that, you know, was struggling that day. And I could get us to the, you know, 7th, 8th, 9th inning, potentially even just finish out a game. So I did that for the middle of my career. And then towards the end, once I actually got released in 2010, and I went to independent ball, which is non-affiliated, and bounced around trying to get back in. I realized the only thing that was going to get me back is velocity.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you've ever heard the term JARP.
I don't think so.
Just another right-handed pitcher.
Yeah, that makes sense. I never heard it, but it makes sense.
Yep. So an independent ball, if, you know, you're throwing 93 sinker ball, there's an army of, you know, 18 to 23-year-olds that are doing that same exact thing.
Yeah, it's tough. That's definitely tough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw a wrench in here. Random question, off script, but it has, I don't want to say haunted me for years. Question I can't get an answer to. And a lot of people don't know the lingo, but, you know, people say, you know, he throws a heavy ball, throws a frisbee, or throws a light ball. Have you ever put any thought into how the heck that is even possible coming out of someone's hand? How someone can throw a heavy ball as opposed to throwing a not heavy, same velocity, right? Is it movement? You know, I can't figure it out.
I mean, I have an answer. Maybe your listeners will, you know, check me on whether this is true or not. But when the ball leaves your hand, that's what a radar gun picks up, right? Is immediately out of your hand. The more advanced scout guns will actually pick the speed up at the glove as well. So they get 2 readings. They get a high and a low, right? Certain guys, for whatever reason, the way they throw, the ball doesn't decelerate. Some guys, it does a lot. They'll lose 4 miles an hour or so on the way to home plate, right?
That's crazy.
But some guys, the aerodynamics or whatever it is, or the release, it maintains its velocity. So I think it's an optical illusion where your brain expects the ball to slow down and feel a certain way.
Yep.
But someone that doesn't happen, it just hits you harder than you're expecting, right? And you're like, oh.
That first of all, I never knew that, so that's pretty insane. And it makes a ton of sense. And I feel like a lot of that too, you can dive into like spin rate and stuff like that. Guys like Pedro with the super long fingers of the ball coming out. That's super interesting. I know I go back and forth with my one buddy about it all the time. So I'm like, dude, you throw harder than him, but his ball is heavy. And he's like, what does that mean? And I was like, I can't put my finger on it. But now I have a better understanding.
You think about your eyes too, right? Because hitters, a lot of times they'll describe it as the ball's jumping, right?
Yeah.
It actually looks like it's accelerating. It's just losing less velocity.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry to throw that wrench in there, but
No
I'm glad you had the answer to it actually, so it didn't freeze you up. Kind of moving transition wise into like the lifestyle, right? So, you know, when you're playing college ball, you're juggling class. You're really not traveling too much, probably compared to the minor leagues. I don't know about at your level in college. Walk me through that lifestyle. You know, going from having class, having to script it out with your college coaches, to then it being your job. And then everyone knows, you know, in the minors, the travel is a lot different than when you're in the bigs, hopping on the planes. Just walk me through your experiences with that, if you could.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's basically all of those awesome times with your buddies in the locker room and, travel around, and that's all you do. We actually kind of turned into like vampires because you didn't have to be in the field till around noon or 1. You go there and eat your lunch, and then you'd be on to do all the pre-work. I don't think a lot of people know if there's a 6 o'clock game, we are on the field at like 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Practicing and doing all our work and things like that. And then you're there until 10 or 11 at night. And then as a pitcher, and with lifting, to maximize your recovery times, you actually lift the night of your start after you pitch, right? So you get done starting and, go in the locker room at 9:30 or 10 and slam a bunch of pre-workout, and you'd actually go in the gym and start working out. So we get done with all that at 11:30, and now you're wired and kind of got that like high from the whole night. Yeah. And we'd stay up really late. We'd either go out and have some fun, or, the minor leagues don't pay the best. So a lot of us, we couldn't just go blow a bunch of money at the bars. So we usually just hang out at someone's apartment. This was like the linked console Xbox days, right?
Yeah.
So we'd be playing Halo on like 2 or 3 screens and, having beers and stuff like that.
That's awesome. It's the good old days. I always talk about too, is like those times where it's tough because minor league doesn't pay the best, but at that time, that's your full-time job. I think a lot of people too, when they see it, they're like, oh, he's playing baseball for a living. Shit's a grind. And you guys are traveling late nights away from your family, not the greatest pay, chasing a dream that you don't know if it's ever going to be there. And from the outside looking in, people are like, oh, they're getting paid to play a sport. It's a very, very difficult thing to get through, I think. And I feel like, maybe that's why some people eventually make the transition out.
Yeah. Yeah, we cleared, trying to remember back, my paychecks we cleared about $600 a paycheck most of the time. All right.
And what was that for the month, for the week?
That's like every 2 weeks or so.
2 weeks.
And then, you got to pay for your apartment. So we'd cram into apartments, we'd live, 5 or 6 to a 2-bedroom apartment. So you'd have air beds in the living room and people in the bedrooms, and, made it work. And at that time, it just seemed normal, right? That's the thing, is it never seemed like a struggle because it was just so cool what we're all doing. And you're like, yeah, this is just how it is.
Hell yeah. No, that's right. It's like in college too. Like you look back at those times where you're struggling just to get a peanut butter and jelly, right? Because you got no money, but you're grinding through, you doing what you love. And sometimes you're like, man, I would go back to doing what I love, having no money, than doing something I don't enjoy. That's one of the big messages for us with like the No Windy Sleeps thing, is find what you love and make it work. Or, and it stems from us, a lot of us who are a part of it, going through that stuff. And I know everyone always looks back and it's like the glory days. I saw that in your photo on here. Is that your daughter? It was on your shoulders.
Yep. Got a 5-year-old daughter now.
And were you still playing when you had her, or was that after?
That was after. So yeah, the kind of the turning point of when to retire, when not to retire after those years, I kind of bounced around.
Oh yeah. What was that like? Like when you got to that point? I mean, what made you finally take the leap? Is it something you battled with for a couple seasons?
Oh yeah, battled hard. The whole late bloomer thing kicked in at the end of my career because I finished as a closer. Like I said, just trying to build velocity and throw hard. It turns out if I get myself amped up and just have to throw 1 inning, I started throwing mid to upper 90s and even cracked 100 a couple times.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I kind of hit that prime where all that work and all that experience just let me go out there and just cut the ball loose and get good results. So it made it hard to walk away because I knew if I kept sticking around and doing that long enough, there might be a spot, and a chance to get back up in the bigs and maybe get that cup of coffee. But after bouncing around with a few different teams at the end, you hit that point where it starts eating into other stuff you want to do with your life, like get married, start a family, actually enter the job market, at a reasonable age where people don't look at your resume and wonder why you're, in your mid to late 30s and have 0 work experience.
Yep.
So it was a multi-year process to feel like I kind of emptied the tank enough to be okay with that.
How did you feel when you finally made it? Did it mess you up a little bit, for a little while, like regret, or some people battle with a lot of depression with it too? Like how was your emotional state after you had finally committed to walking away?
Pretty good, I think, all considered. I was dating my current wife, so I knew that was, the plan. I wanted to settle down and start, a life with her. So that kind of filled a lot of that emptiness. What was really tough was watching baseball at that time.
Yeah.
And seeing all the guys that I'd played with and against, and there's the guys in the big leagues where you're like, oh yeah, we're a stud. And, we always knew they were going to be there. And then there's those guys that you just knew you were, as good as, if not, you're like, I know I was better than that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll make you throw a couple extra beers back at the bar for sure.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I struggled with it and I didn't get nearly to the level you did. I mean, I played D3 baseball, but I was scouted by the Twins my senior year strictly for my defensive ability. Couldn't hit a lick. Nobody wants a 6-foot slap-handed left-handing catcher, right? But defense got me to the point where I was invited to their workout, to their pro day right before the draft. They said, you're not big enough and you don't hit for enough power. Defensively, you have a shot. We'll give you this contract with an independent team that we know. Go do it for a while, get bigger, and maybe we'll see you later. Mm-hmm. I had a decision to make there, and it was very, very tough for me at the time, and I didn't get that close to getting to the bigs. I mean, you're in AAA. And it kind of messed me up for a while where I would sit there and talk to my brother, and he's like, I'm a broke college kid too. And he's like, I will pay for you for a year to just wake up and train and play baseball and work out and do what you got to do to try to make it. Because he knew how important it was to me, and I was struggling with it a lot. But for me, which I think kind of what you're talking about is finding something to fill that void, was coaching and training for me. Mm-hmm. But it's super important to find something to kind of get your mind off it. But it's definitely a battle where you look back.
Yeah. And there's certain moments that make it a little easier. I mean, there's moments that make it easier and harder, right? And some of the ones that make it easier, like I remember, throwing an independent ball in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we knew their scoreboard gun was juiced because everyone's throwing a few miles an hour harder.
My buddy played in St. Paul Independent League, by the way.
Really?
In 2000. Andrew Bennett?
It would have been around like 2011 for me, I think.
Might have been around then too, right before that actually. So right before, yeah, he played at I think is it St. Thomas maybe? I think he might have played at St. Thomas. But
yeah, American Association was that league. But yeah, the stadium guns juiced, and our 90 guys were all throwing 92, 93, and I was getting excited because that's when I was throwing upper 90s, and I'm like, I'm gonna light that gun up, and we'll see if they have 3 numbers on that thing. And sure enough, I was sitting, 100 to 103 on their stadium gun.
I gotta love the stadium guns.
Oh, it was the best, and yeah, you're lthink back at the scoreboard before the pitch even hits a glove, right, to see how hard it is. But there was actually a couple scouts in the stands for that closed, and I think I had I was on that night. I think I threw 10 pitches because, an independent ball, they don't see that kind of velocity. They actually see a lot of guys that throw 85 to 90, and then there's guys that throw 90. So they don't see it. They're not as used to it. And so I blew 10 pitches basically by, to close that game. And then I found out there were some scouts in the stands. I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm going to get the letter. There's going to be a spot for me. And, nothing. I'm like, all right, well, if that doesn't do it, there's got to be things working here that are outside of my control.
Yeah. And a lot of that too, I would talk about, it kind of goes into, like you said, the 18 to 22-year-old has a longer future possibly ahead of them. So each year, your appeal to people goes down because you're older, and it's a shitty thing because it's out of your control. But a guy's that might be the difference maker.
For sure. I mean, after I retired, when I went and finished my degree, and I was coaching at that old junior college, between classes and stuff. But I met one of the old scouts that knew me from back in the day. He was with the White Sox, and he said he had heard about me doing all this stuff and bouncing around. And he said they wondered if I was juicing, if I was on steroids.
No shit.
Because all their reports on me had the sinker ball guy, the starter, the 90 to 93 sinker ball guy. And all of a sudden I turn up an independent ball, closing games out mid to upper 90s. And
you can't pass the drug test.
Right. and yeah, here's this, 30, what was that then? Would have been right about 30 actually. Yeah.
Hey, dude, I always take that as a compliment when people say that. I'm like, because you think either I look good enough where you think I'm on steroids and I'm not, or you think you're performing well enough where people think you are on steroids. I always take it as a compliment. Say, screw it.
For sure.
Maybe not for you in that situation.
Well, yeah, the contract or the invite to spring training would be nice, but I took it as I didn't fit the model.
Yeah.
The Billy Bean, the baseball, analytics, that whole era. They have this all modeled out in terms of percentage rates for people making it to the big leagues or not. And I didn't fit their model. So I think at that point I wasn't worth their risk,
Yeah, that can be a tough pill to swallow too, because maybe your abilities there. But it just, like you said, sometimes it just doesn't fit. And for you to have to cope with that and understand it and be mature about it, it can definitely probably be a big issue for some people.
For sure.
So walk me through. So, all right, so you cashed it out. We're done. You're done. As I say this with a grain of salt, your identity as a baseball player, right? A lot of people, that's their thing. They say don't let your work or whatever be your identity, but it is, right? So that's done. Then what do you go do? So you mentioned you went back to school.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to finish the degree. That was also a decision point too, because when you sign, they give you a scholarship plan to pay for college when you're done. And that has a time limit on it. So I was hitting that time limit at which, I could actually draw that money and finish school.
That's a very unique thing that a lot of people don't know, that I always try to remind people when they're like, why is this kid taking his 15th round draft pick out of high school instead of going to college for free? A lot of these organizations, when they sign you, whatever, they'll give you money to go back when you're done playing, if it's in that window. That's something a lot of people don't know that.
No, and that's why you want to get a letter of intent with a school that costs a lot, right? Because they put all that money aside for you.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep. So yeah, retire, making the transition. What I do from there? You start thinking about what am I going to do? Yeah, because my identity was baseball. That's all I live, breathe, sleep, eat was that every single year. I had invested a lot of time and energy into the physical side, keeping myself healthy, learning how to train, learning how to keep my arm in shape. So one of my plans was to go back to school and you become a PT and open a throwing clinic. So I did a lot of instruction and things like that, and do like a throwing performance center and try to keep kids healthy.
Yeah.
But that was going to require a lot of school, a lot of time to get off the ground. I was already turning 30 and I'm like, it's going to take another decade to make anything out of this. So did what a lot of, athletes do, which is you find out about a lot of your buddies and ex-athletes are making money in sales, And
that takes a strong personality, I would say, and like a confident person to go do that, because there are the sales jobs that people aren't a lot of people fail at. Not everyone goes into it making money if you don't have that personality, the confidence, the ability to speak and communicate with people. So is that what attracted you? When you got out, you wanted to get in there and do that kind of stuff with your buddies were doing?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it was just, what can I get in and actually, like I said, start that life, right, and play some catch up. So yeah, and heard good things, talked to friends in sales. They talked about a lot of what you learned in baseball, the failure part, right? Which is, in sales, you get your teeth kicked in a lot. And you get told no all the time.
I sucked at it. I did it for 6 months. When my brother, when I finished my grad degree, I was like, I'm sick of being a broke coach. I want to go make money in the real world. See all my friends buying cars and houses. So I went and did outside sales with my brother. Oh man, I was bad. It was bad for me. I only lasted 6 months because I walked away and went back to volunteer coaching because I just couldn't take the no. I'm too much of an emotional person and I didn't want to badger someone into it. And I was just so bad at it. I can't even put my exact finger on why, but that's why I have the most respect for people that are in sales and do successful and do it the right way, because I think it's a very good skill and goes back to a lot of good personality traits with people.
Yeah. And the failure, it is unique. I mean, failing in sports is like, it's rough, right? Because you didn't perform well enough to win, and you put all this energy into trying to be good at something and you suck at it, right? But it's easier to get over that, I feel like, because you just try harder, right? It's just practice more.
You just outwork it. You just outwork it.
You just outwork it. But yeah, the no or the rejection in sales, it feels a lot more personal sometimes, you know?
Yeah, because I always said essentially the person's telling, because usually I know when you're in relating with someone talking about a sale, if you sell yourself to them, I always took it personally, like they don't like me enough to purchase whatever I'm trying to sell. So I would go home and I'm like, man, another person doesn't like me, where I'm like sitting there, I just want to be liked by everyone.
Yeah. And yeah, you just can't, you couldn't communicate well enough to get them interested. And, that's, yeah, it's easy to internalize that and just, feel like you can't even talk to people sometimes.
How was your transition when you got into it?
So it actually went really well. I had a really good setup because I worked at this company selling, it was like wholesale office supplies and, data storage media and, actually these things called LTO tapes. Most people don't know, like all the data that's really critical, it still goes on these magnetic tapes. They look like 8-track discs and they go in these giant library server racks. But they hold a ton of information, and they do that because they can pull them out of the machine and they can store them off site in case anything really bad happens.
So it's not all in the cloud.
Exactly. It's like what backs up the cloud, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that's actually these LTO tapes because they hold, terabytes. And anyway, so I found this company that had that and, could make some good money. And my manager was also an ex-baseball player that played in the Cubs organization. It's actually Pat Fairley, Ron Fairley's son, for the baseball, the Dodger fans.
Yeah.
And it was just this kind of gritty, sales office that, sometimes felt more like a locker room than a sales office, just with the banter and, how everybody decompressed. So it was a pretty cool transition environment for me to feel comfortable and, share stories with my manager and that whole transition.
And you mentioned like the locker room feel and the team feel. Did you take a lot of, because I always say when you transition, kind of talked about it a little bit before, hiring former athletes into positions in big companies, because there's so many things that you can take from being an athlete, those skills that you develop and bring them over into the business world. Did you find with that locker room feel and what you were doing, you were able to bring a lot of the skills that you had learned from playing into your professional career in business?
Yeah. The grit, the determination, looking at what you need to get better at to perform well, is something that athletes, I think, really learn how to do over an entire life of, progressing in a sport. Because most coaches will tell you find what you're not good at and work on that more so than what we're really good at, right? Definitely sure.
Yeah. The self-reflection and self-evaluation is one of the most important assets to being able to grow and develop yourself as an individual within or involved with businesses. If you can't do that, you're going to struggle. If you can't feel what's wrong, you can't fix it. I always say that throwing mechanics, hitting, you can't feel the adjustment that I'm trying to change in your swing, you're never going to be able to fix it because you don't know what's wrong. You can't self-reflect and self-evaluate. You're never going to know what you need to fix and to why you're failing. That's why baseball players probably have so much success too, because they fail so many damn times. Before you succeed 3 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. Make 3 out of 10 sales on a call day is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So self-diagnosing, realizing where you need to put your energy to get better. Coachability, right? Yeah. Being able to put your pride aside and, get really good, honest feedback and use that for that same purpose, right? To try to focus on those areas to get better. And then, one of the things that translated really well, which I didn't realize, was for anyone that's competed at a really high level, the amount of work you have to put in gets normalized. You don't realize how special and rare that is, right?
So true. Like I love that you said that, because it's something I battle with constantly. The stuff that you learn from playing a sport for me was coaching, is those long 20-hour days, 8 days a week. It's when you go into the real world and you're 9 to 5 or whatever, you're kind of like, hey, what the heck's going on? You just know to work until the job's done.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone has that same mindset. It's not embedded into everyone's brain like it is for you. And it's second nature for you. You're not thinking about doing it. It's just what you've known for your whole life.
Yeah, it took me a while to realize that, like, that this is not normal. That's not how people behave, right? People don't actively seek that kind of like punishment upon themselves to try to, achieve something. Most people shy away from it and will avoid it, right?
Yeah. And I get it all the time. Ash is like, you can't like ride people that hard all the time because they're not the same person. And most people don't do that. You almost have to take a step back from what you're doing when you're working with other people and your expectations on it, because like you said, it's a small percentage of the people that have that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it took me a while to catch that and realize that was a key advantage. And that was a weapon for me, was that I was conditioned, for that sort of thing. So, putting in the extra hours, showing up early, leaving late, was just normal. So I tried to keep that going, as, now being, out of baseball for a longer period of time, I'm actually realizing it's tough to maintain.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
especially with a family now.
Especially with a family,
and you're at Procore now, which I love the company. Every time I've been down there to visit my brother, awesome environment, awesome atmosphere, great staff, everyone that I've met. Are you in a managerial role there?
Yep. So I manage our enterprise inside sales team.
Damn it. Sorry.
No, all good.
We call Rick. Yeah, the reason I bring that up is just because I feel like that those tools and traits that you learned helped you excel, would be my assumption from the outside and not knowing too much, but might have been a challenge at some point when you finally got to that managerial role of how to manage your expectations of people that might not, or motivate people to get to your level of that mindset. Is that an issue somewhat for you sometimes?
Yeah, you nailed it, right? Because you can't have that expectation of everybody, right? Because that's not everybody wants to work, and everybody has different priorities, and learning how to deal with all those different personality types and work with people to excel with what they're really good at. It's almost a flip in the business world, where we talked about how in sports you work on what you suck at, right? Because that actually yields returns when you talk about athletics and sport, right?
Yep.
But in the real world, a lot of times what people aren't good at is actually things they can't overcome.
You don't even want to touch it. You just want to focus on what they're good at.
Right. I mean, you can make marginal improvements, but if someone's not a really good orator or public speaker, right, you're only ever going to bump them up a couple notches. They're not going to go from, sweating and collapsing on stage to suddenly just talking at stadiums. That doesn't happen, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting to learn how to work with people, and actually you focus more on what people are really good at, what are their natural abilities, and how can we maximize that for, whatever job you're trying to do.
Was that something that, did you know when you kind of got into where you're at now that you wanted to be in a managerial role, have a team, building a team and overseeing it? Or is it something that you kind of accidentally developed into? Because I know you mentioned you were helping out coaching. Obviously that develops a lot. Was that, somewhere that you really wanted to be, or did it kind of just happen through your work ethic and leading by example?
Yeah, just kind of, kept working and seeing what sort of opportunities opened up for me. I had no master plan or, directions other than just, kill my current role and, just be the best at every opportunity I got. When the managerial thing did become an option, I did tie back to, like when I coached, and in the off seasons, I would actually coach, travel ball teams, all indoor athletic, baseball facilities. So I would do instruction and then coach those teams. So I worked a lot with, younger kids. And then obviously that stint in junior college where I coached that team at that level.
I ask you this, that obviously, the company you work for is much different than mine. Mine's much smaller scale, right? The delegation wise, for someone that comes from a work ethic and work till it's done. Do you ever find that as an issue? I know that's something that holds me back, because I like to just sit down and put in the hours, do everything myself, get it done, and not necessarily delegate to put people past their set hours or ask them to do too much. Was that ever a battle with you when you were new into the role of what you're doing?
As far as those expectations of other people?
Yeah, and delegating them work that giving them a task to do. Like for me, it's like, I'm just going to do it all. I don't like delegating and being like, you do this. But as a manager, that's what you're there to do.
Yes. I try to do too much all the time. And I, even internalize the performance of the team, right? Because, that's, playing a team sport, you win or lose as a team. So yeah, I definitely felt that a lot and tried to take a lot on my shoulders before learning how to, get everyone else involved and contribute and delegate more.
I always say that the fastest way to fix that is having a child. My one buddy, oddly enough, the one who played out in Minnesota, we had him on and we spoke about it. And he told me before I had my daughter, he's like, I know that we're used to just outworking everything, just putting in the hours to be better than other people in areas. He's like, you can't do that once you have a daughter. You're a child or a family. He's like, you got to be there for him. You got to have a hard stop. You got to work smarter and be able to delegate to people that you trust. So more so figuring out the way to better your team instead of bettering your personal product is a huge way to be able to kind of maintain. He said it was hard to maintain those hours of work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And learning how to deal with, the psyche of a little kid, because you can't just tell them what to do. And a lot of times they don't even understand what you're trying to get them to do, right? They fundamentally just don't understand communication yet. And they don't know where to set your expectations properly on that.
Yeah. And they don't know that what you're trying to build when you're at work. They just know you're not there. Mm-hmm. They don't know that you're having to deal with the Ben Tuttles of the world. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Yeah.
I think in wrap here, I don't want to keep you too much longer. That's even a word. I really was excited to get you on to kind of talk about that transition, because I think I see it myself, because I train a lot of former college athletes that really don't know the direction of what they're doing. If you had any advice to give anyone about how to take those steps forward, and whether you do make the end or whether you do stick to it, or carrying those traits over into a different field, if there was anything you could say to the listeners out there about that, what would it be?
Yeah. I think it is really understanding, what you're passionate about. What is your beacon, your long-term thing that's going to keep you happy? Because, we talk about, sports and transition. The thing that kept me happy for so long was baseball, right? And I had this singular focus. It was actually, every decision I made was very simple back then. It was, does this help me get to the big leagues, or does this not? Right? I was like binary in how I made decisions.
That's very good. That's a good, when you put it like that, it makes it easier to view, right? Maybe trying to figure that out for what you're doing next, like what your passion is. Does it help my passion? If yours was a family, does this help my family or does it not?
Exactly. So yeah, you replace that thing that made those decisions very easy for you with something else that's really meaningful for you. Exactly. Like family. So a lot of my decisions when I first started is like, is this decision helping me get into a really good place where I can provide and support and fill that role that I really wanted to do? So I found something else to make my decisions a lot easier, right? Yeah.
It's so awesome that you said that, because one of the coaches that I've looked up to, I worked with for a while, very big mentor of mine, pretty much said that exact same thing. He says it he's like, is it helping my wife and my daughter? Is it helping me personally? Is it helping my community? If it's not helping those three things, I'm just not putting my time and energy into it anymore. And it's awesome that you say that, because it's just reinforcement that having that, essentially your why, which we talk about a lot, your why is the reason you make decisions. And you're like, being binary with it is a very simple way. It's just black and white. Is it helping or is it not? But
yeah. And then for those in that process, don't stress if you haven't found that yet. Just do your best. Find things that make you happy and do that. And it'll come eventually. I think a lot of people, you stress if they haven't found that yet, because it can make you feel really lost and out of place, and it can make every decision feel like it's the wrong one, which sucks.
And it can make the magnitude of the decision feel much larger than it actually is. That societal pressure of graduate from your undergrad 22, master's 24, house, car, family by 26. Like, it's not that cut and dry anymore. It's just not how it is.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, try things, experiment, fail, get out there and, fail at a sales job, see if that's your thing or not.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, don't be afraid to move on and pivot and find out what's going to, give you that really easy decision-making process. And,
I love that. The biggest life lesson for me, and I would never take it back, was those 6 months doing that, because I know I failed at it, and it made me realize what my passion was, and it led me back to it. So like you said, fail. You got to fail to learn what you love. If you're one of the people that finds the thing they love to do on the first try, you're the luckiest man I know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, people know that in the gym, right? I mean, it's, the whole reason we go and lift weights and struggle is because it builds strength, and, it's that mechanism is failure. So yeah, get out there and get your ass kicked.
Hell yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I was excited to get you on, kind of talk a little bit of baseball and then get into the carryover. But I know a lot of people will love diving into this one. So I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.